which ones? Those are. This is my update from last week.
I'll just
Uh, I I've decided to change my flower
yeah,
and
I'll maximize lang the window, but I can see the details.
yes, sir. Here. So I've actually changed my plants
Okay.
this in this time because I've exhausted quite a lot of the possibilities of the Chile, and it seems like um it doesn't really bring much architecture, even though it had the potential. But I was trying to mash at some point yoga and drinking a bar, like a chili bar, instead of a chili what do you call this, cafe. But I it's kind of counterintuitive with drinking and yoga, so I was like, okay, I needed to step back and see what else can I do. So apparently, after much thinking and trying to step out of architecture in and out, I got this idea when I was watching a documentary about Japan. There was this about preschoolers in Japan, and then it reminded me of something. He told me that my stakeholders cannot be that noisy or create disturbance, because if I want birds to come in the area. So I was thinking like, oh, okay, who are the specific stakeholders that kind of falls in that category, that uh, fits perfectly to the place. So it's actually deaf students or deaf kindergarten uh, kids. That's how I was able to um, like realize like, oh, okay, there's some potential here, and then what can I bring. Now the next question is like, what can I bring to the kids? How they can learn, and how they can learn. So one of the things about the deaf community that I could talk about is the general spectrum. There's the students who are hard of hearing and those who are totally deaf. So those are hard of hearing has a certain range that they could hear. It's not fully 100% hearing. It's right a really small, um, only a very small spectrum that they could hear. Usually either very low, um, very low frequencies or very high frequencies, but it's not in a normal range of like 20 to 20,000 kilohertz. So um sorry, nawala ako. Oh no, it's lagging. Oh my gosh, sorry sir.
Okay.
And with these kids, I've actually interviewed a couple, around two people who are part of the deaf community who are already graduates of Benilde, and I asked them what are the problems that they faced when they were in a in a younger age. Although um my survey, it's not really a survey, it's more of like a qualitative, it was really casual that I was asking them questions, and I was quite lucky to have them in a discussion what they really they wanted when they were kids, if they were able to relearn things. It's really the problem in the community is that not most of the kids who are born deaf or hard of hearing, they have hearing parents. Likely 95% of the time, only 5% or less are kids that have deaf parents and who are also deaf after that, or hard of hearing and who became hard of hearing because of genetic, um of genetics. So I was studying on how architecture can be implemented um with their disability. Although I don't want to mention it as a disability. It's just it's kind of like um having a language that we cannot directly interpret, so it's quite hard to understand in terms of syntax, in terms of how they can't exactly articulate their thoughts the same way as we do with words. They usually do it by actions. So I've been studying mostly on the proxemics, on how these how the deaf community works. So I started off with the usual proxemics. So what's different in this data is that in the personal and intimate, it's scaled down to preschoolers, according to a study that I was able to check. um, they usually go from in intimate spaces 0 to 30.5 cm. If it's an adult, it's around 42 cm in terms of intimate, and then 42 up to 122, it's almost the same. It's just because preschoolers are smaller than adults. Of course, the personal and intimate distances is quite mas maliit siya. And then the social and public is the same, so still quite it's still constant around the age of 6. That's when um children start to develop an understanding of the understanding of proxemics. So the difference with the deaf community is that in the colors of the circles, this is what makes them a little bit different in terms of proxemics. Usually when it's intimate, they do greet each other. So if they need to tap on the shoulder, or to get someone's attention because they can't exactly hear, if they don't see you within their peripheral or their field of vision, so the greetings is normally by tactile. And then the ideal hand signing areas is by the social or personal um, ranges. So since in comparison to us, we could probably walk in hallways that's 1.2 or less than like 800 millimeters. If you want two people to be able to walk alongside, it should be further than 1.2 meters if it's an adult. But if it's a kid, probably they could squeeze in because their anthropometrics, it's a lot smaller. And kaya medyo natagalan ako sa research. I really had to put the data together in order to understand um what the deaf community in the preschool they what they need. So as for the public proxemics, that's for brief conversations. So calling from afar, they could still see, which is um compared to us who are of hearing, it's kind of still advantageous for them because they could still communicate from afar and understand without shouting or disrupting as much in a social public space. So these are some illustrations that I've based on Deaf Space, which is a book that talks about the deaf community and how can you apply this in architecture, how can you apply the proxemics and make this environment very it's deaf friendly for the community. Besides that, I mentioned also like the hallways, they should also have atriums, nodes, spaces wherein they could interact, because everything is all about it's all about being visible, being able to see their actions and movements so that they'll be able to communicate. But then everything should be scaled down to preschool proxemics, which is something that is not you can find right away in the internet. So I'll get back to that. This was just this is my progress of me trying to understand the stakeholders. So basically what I was doing here is with the broken lines, I was looking at the indirect relationship and then the direct relationship to the different stakeholders I have. So the stakeholders I was able to narrow down to is the purple one is for the school, the green one is the plant that I chose, the red one is the group of birds that I was able to observe in the area, and then the yellow is more of the community residing with the within. So this is people who are not directly related to the school, but are part of the stakeholders like the villagers, the guards, trash collectors, and oh sorry, the invertebrate should be a little bit should be in a separate color, but that's for the animals that are in the area.
What is
So
VM? What is
oh, I forgot to share that. Hindi ko na save. Um, it's in my sheet, sir. Sorry po. It's very raw talaga. Um, why is it not? This is kind of a rough draft that I had, wherein I was trying to separate like who's the community, who's part of the community of um, yeah, who's part of the community, and the birds and the plants. And then these had indications, although I wasn't able to separate them properly yet, to create a table that specifies like if they're a visitor, the students, the school staff. VM is like the village maintenance. O is the occupants of of the place, which is includes the villagers. Then the birds, I was planning to break down even more of the which I presented no first week. So there were 5 species that I was able to observe. Since apparently the black olive sunbird, which I will get back to, um, actually uh, feeds on nectar, and the rest they feed on invertebrates and fruits. So going back to my sheets that I'm gonna be presenting. So, a little bit more about the deaf community. This is the last sheet that I was also studying. Is that the importance of the signatory box? So, in order to understand how they communicate, they actually need their facial expressions. They need their hands signs. So, in a group, of course, there's a certain distance that they have to stand apart in order to be able to see each other and and be able to speak, because of course if the signatory box, it could grow or shrink depending on what they're trying to say. So usually when it expands, that's when they're really enthusiastic, happy, excited, or kind of pissed when you piss someone off. Of Sometimes you get mad. So the signatory box gets bigger. But if you're kind of quiet, more shy, usually it shrinks. So that's how tonality works when a deaf person's trying to speak, or not speak, I mean communicate. Um, so that's why proxemics is a big thing here. And then going through the plants, when I finally narrowed down what who are my stakeholders that fits um in my site. I I I picked my I picked my plant, which is the gumamela. So this is like an overview of how a gumamela um can be grown. So if you could read this, there's 2 ways in order to propagate the gumamela plant. It's either by the cutting method, which makes it a lot faster to grow because you just need to get the stem, be able to cut it to the 45-degree angle, and then let it have sit for 60 days to have roots, and then you could transfer it to plant compared to having in a seedling stage. It takes longer to get bigger, and and be able to propagate. But the advantage about that is that you'd be able to play around um, the colors. So you'll be able to play around how the physical appearance of the flower will go. It's really just simple sciences, like the Mendeleev method of how he used the Punnett squares, and then being able to explore different species. So it could be also taught by the kids in that aspect, like being able to observe more about nature, and make it more interactive, something that's more tactile, something more visual for them to understand. So starting with their surroundings, and when a teacher explains this, it becomes a lot easier. It becomes more enjoyable to process as a child, like how a child thinks. Because one in the interview that I did with the people of the deaf community, the two people I was able to interview, is that deaf has the same abilities as a hearing child. It's just the way they communicate is different. Maybe the way they process language is a little bit different because they use more of their body in expression, but the way they process things is exactly the same. So it's nothing about when I was talking to these uh, especially that one person about the deaf community, is that I wasn't trying to belittle them. It was like I was clearing up, like, oh, this is actually part of my like project exercise in the architectural design, my architectural design classes. Like, how can I be able to bring these plants and bring out the best of it, like for the users, and how I want the kids to learn, even well, for the kids to learn and have fun. That's basically it, but nothing to belittle the deaf community. So yeah, that also gave a huge impact to me and made me more uh well, I guess more careful with the words I say, and in the way I really care about this project. And then so these are like the different what did I write down? These are the different pollinators for the tropical hibiscus plant that can be found on site. Different species of butterflies, bees, and the sunbird, who actually looks at the nectar. And they could the sunbird also consumes invertebrates as well. So this is kind of like a typical scheme when you see in a food chain, like how the producers, the invertebrates, and like the prey uh creates the system. So these are the different birds that I discussed no first week, and then I show like what happens within the ecosystem. And yeah, that's it, sir. And then there were others. Oh, this one. This the other Another way that I could make use of the gumamela plants is how the kids could interact with it. For example, since these plants grow quite tall, around 15 feet, 12 feet tall, um, the kids can will if they could be able to reach these plants, they could create natural what do you call this? They could create paint with natural colors from the gumamela. So it teaches them a lot of art, basic theory, and with the architecture, I could imagine it being able to have different levels so that the kids could probably reach out for the higher the flowers in a higher height, yeah, taller height, so that um, they'll be able to explore more on these. And then I think the last thing I wasn't able to show in the sheets yet is how music how does the deaf interact with music. So I also asked those questions and I've researched on it. The way that the deaf interacts or enjoys music is by they usually feel by the vibrations, especially those who are totally deaf than hard of hearing. Those of hard of hearing, they could hear some at some aspect, some sound, but it's very very low. They usually feel it by vibrations, and I could imagine the architecture having this room wherein it is elevated, probably using planks of wood to allow the vibrations to be felt underneath their feet, but then somehow not disturbing the immediate community. So instead of allowing sound to come out, it's more of vibrations that you feel kind of like in your phone. So how to translate music into the vibrations that they could feel. And then in one of the YouTube videos that I was able to watch by a deaf dancer, what they do besides feeling the beat, they read the lyrics, and then they try to understand it, and then they create dance. Sometimes these dancers add um, sign language as part of it, so it becomes a very interactive learning experience. And I'm still figuring out kung paano i-apply further into architecture. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's it. Sorry, medyo magulo, but yeah, this is my progress so far, sir.
Um, what's the relevance of the Mongo?
Oh, Sir Domongo, I wasn't very sure if makakayanin ko pa. Good thing you picked it up. So, with the Mongo, it was something that um I read up that if the birds eat eat that, they become more sexually active because of the proteins. So it could actually potentially allow more bird population to increase. And then alongside with that, usually, what I remember based on experience, I'm not sure with everyone else, Mongo is like a typical thing to learn when you're in your grade school days to understand like how plants grow. So and besides that, it's a typical dish that we could eat, diba, as Filipinos, as on the side, or something healthy like uh lumpia wrap or something. Besides having it as potentially having it as another means to feed the birds.
So definitely I can imagine the gumamela or yeah the gumame or the hibiscus being developed. I think there's so many ideas behind it. And there's a deaf
Mm-hmm.
community in your village. Is that what you said?
Ano, sir?
There's a deaf community in your village.
In my actually about that, sir. I do not know exactly, but I've checked statistics on like how many the rate of the birth rate of deaf or hard of hearing children. It's
Why,
actually
why is it so many
every
you?
every day mga 8 children who are born of hard of hearing and deaf is born in the Philippines. So um there's so many there's still so many people that who aren't able to get proper education at a young age. Like one of the people I interviewed said that he was taught ASL, which is American Sign Language, but when he went to Benilde, what is used is FSL, which is Filipino Sign Language, and it's completely different. So he had to learn how to adjust. And then another person that I interviewed, he didn't learn sign language at a young age. He was made to train orally. Orally means that he had to learn how to read lips and kind of deconstruct how he could say it verbally. The thing is, he's hard of hearing, so he could hear a very small percentage, and he trained himself to that. So, given that, and there was other statistics showing that many are still not able to uh, learn sign language or FSL at that particular stage na sobrang critical, because as you get older, you could imagine if you don't get to learn like FSL or some form of communication, it gets harder as you grow older. So it applies the same way. Uh like, to be honest, I haven't met a deaf person within my community, but I know like how schools kind of work is, kahit ako, going to Benil is quite a distance, but since where that's where architecture, I could go study architecture, one of the closest schools that I could study, even though I'm in Cavite. For sure I will still go through the distance. Ayun, sir.
Okay.
That's
Uh, I have two things. You need to study how primary school. Is it a primary school? Like you need to identify the program for that. So
mm-hmm.
it has to be reflected on the bubble diagram and the organizational chart. You cannot just propose and assume that this is how they're going to work. So you need to study the typology. It's normally about combination of typologies when it comes to this project. So and then it's interesting that you mentioned that they deal with sound. So if they want to dance, they can deal with vibrations. Are there studies wherein the actual sound is reflected on the vibration and they are made to dance because of the shaking and the vibration? How do they respond to vibrations?
Mm. From one of the videos that I watched, because that's how I could best observe the deaf community. There was this dancer. He's a deaf dancer. What he does is he plays the music and then puts it on his hand so that he could feel the beat.
Yeah,
And
it's listening, but maybe it's better to. I think it will be totally impressive if you can find out if they are responsive to vibrations. It's one thing to listen, but it's another thing to make them do something because they sort of heard it. They
oh,
get it? It's
you
like,
mean felt it, sir? Like
huh?
in a space, sir. Like if
No, then
someone's
in a way, you're the one who's creating the space. You're the one proposing a space. That's your project. And for you to be able to create that space, you need to prove through a study or probably an example that you can see somewhere that you need to research that deaf kids or anybody or if you, even adults, they have the ability to respond to vibrations.
oh yes, sir. There is pala. There's a certain part of the brain. It's There's a certain part of the brain kasi with the vibrations. It correlates to the part, what do you call this? It correlates to the part wherein when we hear sound, that's the same area of the brain lights up. It
Okay.
according to an MRI scan. Um when they played vibrations to the deaf, I remember it's adults. It's the same location of the brain. I think scientifically that proves that they associate sound closely to vibrations. That's
No,
the closest I've
no,
read.
I mean, I'm asking about what will compel them to dance. Is the
Mm.
vibration about listening only, or does it give them the signal to dance?
Oh, okay, sir.
Because the dance is another action, it's a response. They hear it. Yes, they can listen because they can hear it through the vibration. But the next thing is, do they dance to it?
Okay.
They get it. So that's why if you can, it will be
Um,
impressive if we have a study
sir.
that makes them dance based on the vibration.
Well, sir. I just wanna what do you call this? Clear up lang. They don't really hear. So they respond vibrations with their skin receptors. It's more of tactile, so it's not really heard. It's more of felt.
No, I
It's
know
kind
that.
of
All I'm saying is because you mentioned dance earlier, it gave me an impression that you wanted them to dance.
yes, sir.
Exactly. That is why I'm asking you to produce a study or to produce a proof showing that aside from listening to aside from
Feeling,
yeah, not man hearing kasi nga they cannot hear.
feeling, sir.
The,
Feeling.
the feeling, the vibration. The second action is dance, di ba?
Mm-hmm.
Meron pang study na they know that when they feel the vibration, they are compelled to dance.
Mm. Usually, sir, from what from it's not really a study, like I said. It was a YouTuber. He's a deaf
Usually, that's good
dancer.
enough. I mean, if it really proved that the vibration alone made the deaf person dance,
It's not no vibrations alone, sir. It's usually done by social interaction as well. Because I um this for example, the from what I watched, he he was observing people like laughing, smiling, and moving their bodies.
mhm,
And then he feels like he instead of hearing the sound, he felt more of the vibrations, and like it's kind of in tune with the dance. So it doesn't rely totally on vibrations alone. It also
so
there's
uh,
an
social
encouragement of the
there's a social aspect to it.
yes,
Oh, that's fine.
yes.
That's fine. Um, yeah, that's good. The other one, I think I mentioned it already, like getting to know the program.
Mhm.
Okay. If you're able to pull this off, uh, but I don't wanna inflate your ego, might even be better than some of my thesis topics that
Huh?
mm, because it's thesis level na rin kasi in a way that if you are able to identify the parameters and the conditions that influence architecture based on the user profile, which you did already,
Mhm.
actually, um, that's what I'm actually demanding from my thesis students. So so it's a good start. So I basically from now on it's all about exploring what you can do with this data.
Mhm. Yes, sir.
Okay, so don't hold back. So hopefully
Yes.
it's mostly architecture next week
Mhm.
because
Yes, sir.
a lot of the things that you presented anyway are convincing enough, and you just
Mhm.
implement um, more information later on as what do you call it, as to sort of add more to the research body or content. Okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Sige, very good.
Sir.
For a rough drawing, it's good enough naman.
So, question lang, sir. So, with the data that I present, I just have to be more specific with the parameters of the stakeholders, right, sir? And then how can I make it more architectural, presented more architecturally, like how
Convenience information. Like
and then
like uh I'm sure when you are doing your architectural explorations already, all these data are being considered. You already mentioned proxemics, the spacing will be different. It's very similar to the work of my former students who dealt with the Hobbit house, dealing with um, the um, with their anthropometry, with their measurements. So
mhm,
it dictated the sizes of uh, the the height of the steps, the height of the seating areas. It influenced that. So it's the same thing with this one because you're dealing with children.
yes,
But
sir.
you have to remember that the teacher will be normal height, I would.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be that dynamics of other different two dimension, dimension of the instructor and dimension of the being the student, and and how interplays with the plant, with the activity, the things that they can do with the hibiscus plant, and hopefully with the mango plant. It's quite interesting because it will be like enhancing the visual aspect of their learning, um, when you're talking about the pigments that are produced by probably the leaves and the flower itself, etc. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I'll work on it po.
Okay, and then if I see something lacking na lang is that we are going to supplement it later on with sheets. Because I don't want to drag the weekly, especially in your case, Tracy, because you are somewhat advanced amongst your peers. And when I don't want to see the same a sheet of party,
Yes, sir.
uh, like uh, like just a portion of the building, um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because it's being dragged, no, the way, parang sayang ang oras and sayang your capability, and you're not jumping towards that phase, that stage. You need to jump to that phase, eh.
Yes,
and
sir. Yeah.
and you keep on, what do you call that, dwelling on that phase of doing the party, etc. You will not grow. You need to take risks. It's the same
Yes,
thing
sir.
with Janelle. Bea, kasi it's only my student now, so it's fine. Uh, Mark is still figuring out how to do the party. Idris also. Lance is also figuring out the party, but I think Lance can catch up. Uh, Jao, I'm still getting to know, and the rest of the guys. So, but with you, Janelle, I think you can move forward.
So, sir, next time yung papakita ko kung kaya na,
Hmm.
can I show like more instead of just the party, somehow more of a systematic, it's already kind of programmatic in a way.
Yes.
Instead of it's okay if I jump straight there instead of
Okay, what I can do naman is, if there's something lacking, I will question it. Eh.
sige, sir.
Then,
I'll do that
and
ng diretso.
I'm confident that you guys know already that if there's something questionable about with what you're doing, you'll be the one to supplement it anyway. Yeah, but you have that paranoia already. It's ingrained in you already. So with the terms, the several terms that we were together. So
Yes, sir.
but I'm in your case and probably Janelle, I want to push you guys to move forward and take risks. Okay? And
Yes,
just,
sir.
of course, just keep in mind that it will still keep developing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Sir, unrelated to my work. Ano po yung next, yung tech desk, sir, about
Which one? The sorry.
your, ano, for your studio?
Of our moderators before, the one who helped us with the critique. And I ended up just following his kind of like stream of thought, mainly because we weren't considering too much pragmatics, as we've mentioned before, and that we could be a bit more free. And I realized because it would be best for Pasay and Hapay, the plant that I'm focused on, to be more centered around health and wellness. And so when I dug deeper into it, I actually found quite a number of basically all of these benefits that were circulating around this program that it could also kind of interjoin with, or basically be linked with. And from what I've come to find, the Pasaw na Hapay has primarily four main benefits: the loperamide, the anolmintix, and also the anti-inflammation, and also the hepatoproactive properties. So these are things that you could do by actually just simply crushing the plant and providing them as like a herbal kind of medicine. And researching on the kind of diseases that it tackles, it's primarily towards diarrhea, parasitic helminths. There's also the inflammation, and also hepatotoxicity, and cancer. So these are the diseases that it quite relates to quite directly. And so I just wanted to see what would be my who would be my stakeholders, and what kind of diseases they would hold, and how my plant would actually directly benefit them. But at the same time, also wanted to see how the pasaw na hapay also inevitably related um, to the workers as well. And basically what the hospital would have, which is on the left corner. This is what the patient and practitioner, and basically what the hospital needs to have: the sense of place, privacy, natural view, sunlight, exercise, reduced noise, and humidity. And so basically these are needed both for patients and for practitioner. And I tried to relate how that was also a need of pasaw na hapay. And so mainly the needs of pasaw na hapay were reflected quite directly was the sunlight and the humidity, mainly because pasaw na hapay always grows in areas, like I mentioned before, in areas where there's a lot of rice fields. So it's usually quite humid in those areas. So incorporating the humidity, I also wondered what could be a cure to these diseases to aid, because it can't just be pasaw na hapay. What are the food that these people can consume? What are the patients? What can the patients consume along with the herbal medicine? And that's when I started researching. Okay, what are the most relative food that they can all eat? And so what I've come to find with diarrhea, parasitic helminths, and inflammation, it's actually very good to eat salty broths. So basically, these can come in fish broths, basically. And so when I kind of narrowed down that I wanted to deal with this primarily, I realized that it also had a relationship to the pasaw na hapay, in a sense that the water, if we ever tried to keep sardines, for example, when I researched, sardines are basically quite good for these people. So, and it's quite abundant here in the Philippines. So in terms of climate, it can survive in the Philippines. So when I figured that out, I realized that I can create a system where it could benefit the plant in a way that it could help with the humidity of the area. But at the same time, I also wanted it to be able to contribute and help the growth of pasaw na hapay, which is one of the reasons why later on I incorporated as well to have some aquaponics system going on in the entire hospital as well, because the sardines can actually also provide the nutrients that the pasaw na hapay can absorb, mainly from the feces of the sardines. They can actually help the pasaw na hapay grow as well. So just kind of creating a rotation, like a complete flow of them kind of connecting to one another. And so because I noticed that they quite directly related, I decided I wanted to kind of continue in this direction. There was a lot of strength to the relationships. So this is the connections. If I may continue, this one is the cases. So what I did next was I wanted to make sure that there was data. There was at least still a bit of a pragmatic reason why at least I could kind of defend to some extent why I had to have a center for a clinic that centers on these kind of diseases. More as I've come to research, it's more of a specialized gastroenterology clinic, which focuses mostly on the digestive tract, because these are the things that the plant can heal, like I've mentioned in the previous slides from before. And so I wanted to narrow down on diarrhea. Mainly, if you look back into it, a lot of the diseases actually circulate around diarrhea. And unfortunately, the cases and also the deaths, which you can see, the mortality rate is the red one, and the morbidity rate is the yellow one. They've declined through the year 2000s, but they increased around 2010 and onward. So this is actually around 2013 when it started to go back up. Until 2020, it's actually still going up. And this is the sad truth about the Philippines, because when I researched United States and United Kingdom, Europe, and a lot of northern countries, not a lot of people have diarrhea as a problem for mortality rates. So I kind of found that interesting that in the Philippines we have that kind of problem. And so I try to also kind of dig a bit deep as to why. Sorry, as to why. And one of the things that I got from it was that primarily during the 2013s is also where a lot of the cases for the dengue happened, which is also related to the diarrhea. So it started to go up from there. But nonetheless, it shouldn't be a problem for developed countries, because they never really had diarrhea as a mortality rate, as a big issue. Unfortunately, in our governmental page, diarrhea is something that is it's on top of our list of like detrimental diseases in the Philippines. So knowing this, I realized that there is a need for a center that we can cater to a public that actually needs this in the Philippines. So primarily also because of food poisoning, these are also some of the examples why people eventually have diarrhea a lot here in the Philippines. So I guess you could say quite related to sanitation as well. But nonetheless, just here to prove that diarrhea is a disease that is a bacterial kind of like infection that we want to deal with. So yeah, moving on from there, I then started to create the stakeholders. So this is actually taken from I actually did a study on the specialized gastroenterology clinic that was actually in the United States. Uh, it's under the Coalition for Health Environments and Research 2004. So I did a research on basically these kinds of clinics as well. And a lot of these data are AIA supported. So these are organizations that they actually supported these kind of data that I have used in this presentation as well. So it's like a mixture. So the color codes, which you can see, it relates to the first slide. Basically, the farmers in charge of the plants, of course, and the fish as well to some extent. And of course, we have to have a cook to also kind of help out with the arrangements of the people who are going to eat these kinds of the fish, the sardines that we have. And what was interesting was because the sardines also had a good impact on basically the immune system of people. So it also caters even to the doctors, even to the medical assistants. So it kind of played such a great role for everybody. So that's why we kind of have connections with the cooks, and as well, of course, care coordinators. Sorry, care coordinators were also important. So these are basically just to show the what goes around inside in the clinic rather. And this is just a few slides just to show what I wanted to narrow down on, which was to provide herbal medicine using pasaw na hapay, but also at the same time, but also at the same time using that harvesting method to also provide greenery. So this is actually taken from a study done in basically this is a study on natural views, increasing turnover efficiency and decreasing stays. This was a report that was done in the 1984 by basically this Roger Ulrich did a investigative study on so this is actually an investigative study on an evidence-based design on hospitals. So he kind of started noticing that the more greeneries that the person could be exposed to, the more that they actually get well faster, and also they decrease the number of people who actually stay overnight. So those are the details that could also help directly from actually showing the harvesting of the plants from the clinic itself. Because as you've seen in my location, it's quite congested with a lot more buildings and a lot more vehicular traffic. So we wanted to center their attention onto this harvesting area, which also provides that benefit. The second thing that I wanted to narrow down on is, of course, the aquaponics system, which can also directly become the fish broths for the people. Initially what was being suggested was chicken, but because chicken can be quite allergic to some patients, we had to eliminate that out and just replace it with fish. And fish had a calcium that was quite good for the immunity, right, for the immune system of the people. So we preferred to go after that instead. And beyond that, because they were quite more related to aquaponics as well, they could easily go into a circle. So that's why sardines was the one that I chose. So you could also see how the pasaw na hapay can kind of coexist with this system as well with the fishes. And forward into the studies as well. I also basically did a study on basically the coalition. This is also another research done by the Coalition for Health Environments and Research. So they found that colors blue and green reduces stress and anxiety, while red alerts. So these are just basically great ways in order to allocate the use of colors inside the hospital. So this is actually a study for health institutions. And I also incorporated Le Corbusier, who did a Venice hospital in 1963 as a response to this new discovery at the time that sunlight can kill bacteria, because back in the day that wasn't a general knowledge, but nowadays it is. But what was interesting was how Le Corbusier actually applied it into architecture, which got a lot of recognition. What he did was that people should be given both horizontal and also vertical access to sunlight. So if they're waking up in the morning, they should be exposed to sunlight. If they're walking around in the room, they should also be exposed to sunlight. So that was primarily his application for it. So these are basically just design inspirations that I want to get into that are tapped into real evidence-based designs that I can kind of work which one actually works and which one doesn't. So moving on to the 5 factors. So this is again from the study that I've been studying as well on hospitals. So this one's a hospital focused hospital focused research that's more onto hospitals in general. Like, what do they expect? Because I also didn't want to just jump into a hospital. I also wanted to understand what are the necessities of a hospital, so I could hopefully do it right and not mess up. So the things that I got from it was there's essentials of sense of place, private rooms, nature and art, noise and color. So these are all tested and have also been observed quite well through studies, through psychological, but also design studies that they had for the hospital. So sense of place, primarily because a lot of people get lost in the hospital, just the way they're oriented. And I'll show you how I apply that later on into the bubble diagram. So basically, sense of place, a lot of people get lost in the hospital, unfortunately, because of how corridors are oriented and how there's just numbers for the rooms. So this kind of stresses out, of course, the patients, because when they go out, they feel like they don't know exactly where to go. And so that kind of works against their health, because they're quite focused on being stressed instead of healing. And so this study incorporates all the lessons that they've learned through the years. So back in the day, people were cared for together. So forgive me for using these, but let's say if a best way I can paint a picture of it is during military, like in military situations, for example, their medical tent is usually sat next to each other. So basically, people inside their bed is sat next to each other. That was the layout before in Europe and in America, so that they could cater to everybody much faster. But the issue that we have there is that there's tendency for wrong medication that's given to the wrong person, because of course it can get quite confusing. So nowadays they prefer that everyone has more private spaces for the hospital. So although it might reduce the number of people it can hold, nonetheless it's still quite of a necessity. The next one is the nature and art. So this is more of a recent study, actually. The nature and art is, like I mentioned a while ago, nature helps reduce the cortisol level. It helps reduce the stress that people feel, but it also gives them an overall more positive outlook on their health and their well-being, which really, it's more of a psychological aspect, that it helps them cope with their situation better. They think more positively with nature and art around. So this is again another necessity that was pointed out, and the number 3 necessity. The 4th necessity is noise, which is unfortunately something that we have currently today. A lot of hospitals, through their hallways and even through outdoors, there's a lot of either cars, vehicular traffic that creates a lot of noise, and some of them can be as simple as as nurses running around the halls with their carts. The wheels of the carts, they can sometimes screech, and that can be heard by the patients. So now you can kind of slowly start to understand, okay, these kinds of rooms, they need to be quite acoustic. So you kind of start to realize how you might want to design them through these studies. And then finally, like what I mentioned before, which was the colors. The colors help patients have a sense of orientation. So nonetheless, you still want them to feel that they know where they are as they go through the hospital. So nonetheless, it should be simply from themselves. They should be able to understand where to go. So they shouldn't always need the all of the extra staff just to tell them where to go to the bathroom and what have you. So all of these have to be taken into consideration. They should feel quite at home, and as well as be able to orient themselves anywhere if they want to go all of a sudden to to a certain location or a new location. So throughout the entire study as well, you'll notice in that disease portion I had exercise. And exercise is quite an important factor, though it's not a primary factor of the hospitals or the clinics.
Okay.
But in the cases of the people with the diseases, they do, mainly because it really just helps with their health, especially with people who have a lot of diarrhea. They actually need a lot more exercise and a lot more water as well. So this overall just kind of gives that kind of just paints a picture on how the environment can really kind of also not to just but to also kind of feel that they're still quite connected to the world, to the ongoing world. I wanted to be able to reflect that because if you noticed back then, in the studies, we wanted to focus on the greenery, and why? Because they brought positivity, right? They brought these thoughts, these images that they can be better, they can get better, and so these things we wanted to kind of give hope to the people in the recovery room, to people in the aquaponics area. We wanted them to look up and actually really direct their eyes up and see hope that there are a lot of people here who are also getting through checkup, and one day that's just going to be them too. So we wanted to focus all their experiences, all their attention kind of onto that kind of outlook. And so I also placed a lot of bridges around the area just to be quite fun in that opening. It becomes a high foyer that also allows the light to go in. So this is actually one of the reasons why we have a huge foyer here. I also wanted to have the aquaponics not solely depend on systems inside, but also the natural light. So if later on I'll find a way to incorporate the solar carving so that could be more creative as well. So in this area, this is where you have most of the waiting areas, which is quite interesting. You go up to the 5th floor and you find a lobby and you have a waiting area there. If you're waiting to be escorted to the recovery rooms of your people, of the patients that you're related to. So that's how it kind of connects together. And then finally, of course, the procedures are also there. So again, it's all of your loved ones, all of them. You kind of I wanted to give that sense that they're quite just around. They probably visit every once in a while, and you can kind of get that sense they're just upstairs, or they're just visiting upstairs, and they can meet you downstairs eventually. And it gives this less of this separation, this feeling of separation from them, because you kind of see the people who are visiting, the people who are going in and out. And then finally, of course, the kitchen is also there because you want it clean. You want it also to be able to exhaust out into the opening. Into out in the into the air. So this could result to lesser ducting, and because kitchens would have their own specialized ducting as well. They can't basically they can't go together with the recovery room. So you kind of keep it separate above as well. So that could reduce the cost. So everything's just going down to the recovery room, and that's how they kind of get fed as well. So that's the entire actually the procedure. Just to mention, the procedure is actually for colonoscopy, because that's also a part of the clinic priorities that they had. So again, near the offices again, so that people can kind of access them quite well. And that's actually where my presentation ends. I'm still trying to do more something that's more that has a lot more form. But yeah, this is so far the gist that I wanted to. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Would have been better if it was done in a 3D diagram, like how Bjarke Ingels would do it. And because you were explaining a lot of adjacencies, and then you're talking about the floor-to-floor relationships, it's very hard to imagine. I can imagine it, but visually it's going to be a little challenging. The second comment is the bubble diagram is mostly about the pragmatic aspect, like the program that you're thinking of, but the creative part, like how you are deconstructing the idea behind the planting system, how the plant is going to be uh, used in the facility, and what is what how it will be translated physically. and how it will intertwine with the other spaces. It doesn't really explain, except probably you have an aquaponics in the middle, and then everyone is connected to that. But that's about it. But you have a medical herb store. I don't know how this is related to the aquaponics. So yeah, so I hope there's more there's a flow chart or bubble diagram that illustrates or demonstrates how you are creating a flow with the planting system, because this is all just adjacency of rooms. I haven't seen. I want to see how you're going to create a program based on the plant, like how you're going to, what is the process behind the aquaponics. I need to see that. Do you know what I mean? uh,
Yes.
the reason why I want you guys to create different versions of bubble diagrams. You have the pragmatic, which is this already, adjacency of the rooms, and then you have the creative part wherein if you're talking about the aquaponics, then what is the bubble diagram of the activities involved in it? Like, do I need a storage for it, and then a place for the seedlings, a place for the sunlight, a place for the water, a place for everything? The bubble diagram will demonstrate how much you know about the plant that you are researching. That's the creative part. Eh. So far, I'm not seeing it here. It's I'm seeing it on the green part, on the green bubble, but it's not really saying anything so much. Do you follow, Aaron?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, but yeah, that's my criticism for your work. I hope to see more next time, because you're a hard worker, and you're very um, what do you call that? You're very confident in your presentation, and and I think you really put a lot of heart in your work. So I hope you heed my advice so that it will translate to uh, to a more progressed work next week.
Yes, sir.
All right. Sige. Thank you, Aaron.
Sir, si Jericho daw.